This video is specifically for stretching your legs, and you'll use it in two ways, either first thing in the morning, and in using it in that way, it's an opportunity to connect from the head down into that physical body, whether you're training or whether you're just going about your normal day. And it also helps us to keep the body mobile, hopefully preventing injury, and also reducing the chances of cramping in the gym. And then you might use this video specifically after training. So that offers us the opportunity to reduce the excessive buildup of lactic acid, which is where the pain comes from the day after training. And it also helps us to flood the muscles you've worked with fresh blood and oxygen, and they're vital in building new muscle. So it's useful for you to have a brick and a strap. And if you don't have yoga-specific ones, you can use a book, anything you've got at home that can prop you up. And in terms of the strap, you can use something like a blanket or a scarf. So we'll start today on our hamstrings. Come to lay down onto your back. Have your strap, your blanket, your tie, whatever it is you're using, and hook it over the top of your left foot. So just below the toes, just where the joints are, and then kick that leg straight up to the ceiling. And the important thing is to be working with a straight leg. So if that means you need to let the strap out, then that's absolutely fine. Let the strap be longer. Keep that right knee bent for now, and let the toes relax as if they're being pulled back towards your shin, and kick actively up into your heel. So you should feel the energy traveling up through the leg. And we're going to hold it here for 30 seconds, and that's the pivotal time for stretching. Any less, and it won't leave that permanent flexibility. When you're here, just be mindful of the breath, keeping the shoulders soft. Make sure you're not clenching the jaw. If you have any pain behind the knee, that's a signal to let the strap out a little further. If you feel that the hamstring is starting to ease and feel a little softer here, then as you exhale, bend your elbows out to the side and draw the foot closer towards you. And the final option is to straighten that right leg down to the ground. But in doing so, make sure the foot doesn't start to hover off the ground, and that's indicative of a tight hip flexor. So make sure that right hip is staying grounded. Let's stay here for a few more breaths, kicking actively up into your left heel. And then unhook the foot. Let it come all the way down to meet the right leg. And as it lands, just notice simply, how does my left leg feel compared to my right? Just staying curious about the changes that are happening in the body as we stretch. And let's come straight onto the other side. So bend the left knee, hook the right foot in the strap, extend the leg straight. Remember, you can let the leg come down further if you need to. Kick actively up into your heel and let your toes be pulled back towards your shin. And notice if your foot wants to press back into the strap. That will be your body's way of protecting your hamstring. So just mindfully relaxing the ankle and pulling the toes back down towards the shin. And then just watch your right knee isn't rotating out or in too much. It's pointing directly up towards your right shoulder. If you want more of a stretch, pull the foot closer towards you, an option to straighten that left leg away from you. But you need to be at a place where you can still breathe. So about an 8 out of 10 is a good place to be on the stretching scale. Let's stay here a little longer. Make sure the shoulders remain soft, not holding tension in other parts of the body. We're going to take 3 more slow breaths here. Using your exhale to maybe find a little more depth in the stretch. And then unhook the legs, straighten both away from you. Just notice how they feel. And then bring yourself up to seated. And you need to sit yourself up onto a pillow or maybe one of your blocks. If you feel like you're being pulled backwards and you can't sit upright, then you'll sit up onto your prop and feel as though you're just sliding the pelvis off it, and that will tilt your spine upright for you. Hook the strap over the end of both your feet and find a level with your hands where you can sit up tall, a straight back. And it's very proud in the chest. Feel as though you're threading the chest through your arms, grow tall into the crown of the head. As you exhale, start to hinge forward from your hips, reaching towards your toes, but not with a rounded back. So keep the back straight and fold from there. And you can bring both straps together and walk your hands down the strap until you find that deep stretch running down the backs of the legs. Notice if your kneecaps are trying to hold on to some of the tension and the effort, relaxing them as you breathe out. Taking another 5 breaths here. Every time you breathe out, maybe you find a little more space to fold a bit deeper. And if now you find that you can reach your feet, then you can take hold of the toes and pull them back towards the shin a little more, but make sure you're still sitting with that beautifully straight spine. On your next inhale, bring yourself all the way back up to seated and bring yourself off the brick. So we'll come into our hips now. Come to tabletop pose, which is your hands under your shoulders and your knees under your hips. And step your left foot between your hands. And if it doesn't quite get there, you can take hold of the ankle and step it through. Bring your chest upright. Tuck your tailbone underneath you. So that's a feeling of pressing your pubic bone forward and leaning back with your lower back and pulling navel to spine. Rest your hands alongside your body, roll your shoulders back, and then start to lean back slightly. And you should feel that stretch running down your right hip. Every time you breathe out, tuck tailbone a little further underneath you, lean back, grow taller through the crown of your head, and hold here. Any pain in your knee resting on the ground, then you can place a blanket or something soft under the kneecap. We're going to just take one more breath here, only because it's an introduction to a deeper stretch. Bring yourself back upright, hands to the ground. Tuck your right toes underneath you, lift the knee up off the ground and slide it further away from you. So you're now in the longest split between your two thighs that you can find. If bringing your palms flat to the ground isn't available right now, then you can bring your hands onto bricks or all the way up onto the full height of the brick. And then we're going to sink our weight down into our right hip and make sure the left knee doesn't travel past the ankle. Find this sensation of opening the chest, so lifting the head a little higher. And every time you breathe out, rest heavier down into that right hip. Inhaling, you should feel this around the hip flexor, and you'll also be stretching your psoas muscle here. Any pain in the knee, bring yourself out slightly. Finding that 8 out of 10 stretch, making sure you can still breathe smoothly here. One more breath here. Pull your navel back to your spine and let that initiate the movement of coming out of this stretch, just to protect your lower back. So we'll come straight into our next stretch from here, which is straightening that left leg, flexing the toes to the ceiling, so a classic runner's stretch. Bring the bricks closer back towards you. If you can reach the ground, you're very welcome to. But the key is to be working with a flat back. And that means drawing the shoulder blades together down the back and pressing belly towards the thigh. Press your left heel so firmly into the mat that you feel it radiate all the way up the hamstring. And then, as though you're trying to, this is an exaggerated version, drag that leg back towards you. And you'll engage the hamstring far more. And then use your exhale to sink closer towards that thigh. Make sure you're not jutting the left hip out. Tuck it in. Hips are square towards the front of the mat. And let's stay here for 3 more breaths, making sure your neck is an extension of your spine. So that means looking down towards your toes. Pressing the foot down, feeling as though you're dragging it back towards you and flexing those heels towards the shin. Last breath. Come upright and bring left leg back to meet the right. Come to tabletop pose, and then we'll take it all again on the other side. Step the right foot between the hands. And then from there, engage navel back to spine and use that to bring yourself to upright. And to begin with, you're in 2 right angles with your legs. Bring your hands to your hips. Feel the hip bones start to rock backwards as the pubic bone tilts forward. And you should feel that running down this left front of the hip and then leaning the weight back slightly. If you feel this as a sharp pain in your knee, then you need to come out of it slightly. But if it's the kneecap that's sensitive, then you can rest a blanket underneath it. Relax your arms alongside you. Make sure your shoulders are being drawn down the back and you feel as though you're extending into the crown of your head. Holding here. Every time you breathe out, feel as though you can relax the left hip a little more and lean your weight back a little further. Last 3 breaths here. Squeeze your left glute and see how that might intensify the stretch a little more. Last one, make sure everything's nice and soft. And then pull navel back to spine to bring you upright. Bring your hands to the ground or onto bricks if you can't reach. Tuck your left toes underneath you, lift the left knee up off the ground, walk it further back behind you, drop it back down, option to place it onto a blanket, and make sure your thighs are in the longest split that they can be. And then keep the hands on the ground and work with a flat back from there. Otherwise, bring your hands back to your bricks. Knee is tracking directly over ankle. Shoulders are squeezing back together. And you're allowing the weight to sink softly down into that left hip. So no sharp, quick movements. Everything in these stretches is like you're working through syrup or honey. Very slow, mindful movements. If you get any pain here, then bring yourself out of it, and you can always come back to the last stretch that we were in. Make sure the shoulders have space from their ears. They're not being held up here tightly. Keep your jaw nice and soft. And maybe the gaze, the eyes, are looking softly ahead of you, starting to tune out of the environment around you, that external stimuli. Just staying very focused and curious about what's going on in your body right now. We're here for 3 more breaths. Last one. Navel pulls back towards the spine. Start to shift your hips backwards, straightening that right leg. Flex the foot, and you might need to just walk it a couple of inches further forward. Bring your hands back roughly in line with your knee. And tune into this feeling of tucking left hip back and right hip slightly forwards. Working with a flat back. And you can imagine that as if your spine is a telescope and you want to see from the base of your spine right up to the crown of the head. Any curves in the spine will limit your view, so make it beautiful and straight. Press your heel actively down into the mat and then feel as though you're dragging it back towards you, and that will fire up the hamstring right up before the glute. Pull the toes back towards the shin and hold it here. Just take a moment to listen to your breath and notice if it's very shallow. Maybe it's rapid. Perhaps it's right up in your collarbones. See if you can bring that breath down into the belly, slowing it down, mindfully listening for it. Every time you exhale, perhaps you soften yourself a little further in. Let gravity do some of that work for you as you release into it. We're here for 3 more breaths. Make them slow. And bring yourself all the way back up. Step right knee back to meet the left. Take your bricks off your mat and turn yourself to the length of the mat. We're going to come to a pose called frog pose, and this is for your hip flexors and through the groin. So kneecaps tend to be very sensitive in this pose, so I'd recommend placing a blanket or at least doubling up your mat to rest under the knees. You're going to bring your knees as wide as you can possibly get them, and then bring your feet in line with your knees. Turn them out to the side and hold it here. Start to rock your weight forwards and backwards. Take your time going backwards. Check that it feels healthy in the knees. And you may feel like you come up against this barrier where you just can't push back any further. That's where we go to on our exhale. So inhale here, exhale, press back. Inhale. Exhale. 2 more times like this. Last one. Now stay here. Maybe you stay up onto your hands, or if you've got the room today, you might be able to drop down onto your forearms, but make sure you're still pushing your weight back. So as if you're trying to sit your bum back towards your heels. Every exhale you take, maybe your knees are able to slide out just a little further, even if it's 0.5 millimeter. Soften your shoulders and see how that helps you to soften the rest of the body. Surrendering into this stretch. We're here for 5 more breaths, and this is an intense one, so really work on breathing through it. Last 3. Maybe the knees slide out just a little further. And on your next inhale, bring yourself back up onto your hands if you were down. Walk your knees closer together. And then bring yourself back to the length of your mat and bring yourself to seated. So you might cross your shins behind you and sit back from there. But if that feels awkward, then just come with the legs to one side. And we're going to take butterfly pose, one of the best hip openers. And we tend to hold a lot of emotional tension in our hips. So it's an opportunity to release that as well as physical. Sit yourself up onto a brick if you find that you're rounding and you feel like you're being tugged backwards. If you can sit cross-legged comfortably, then you don't need the brick. Bring the soles of your feet together about a foot width away from the groin. And then rest your hands lightly onto your shins and find this very proud chest. So you're threading your chest through your arms, squeeze your shoulder blades together and look ahead of you. Now keep this straight spine, and every time you breathe out, start to hinge forward. As you do, let your knees become heavier, resting towards the ground. And it's a feeling as though your thighs are externally rotating. So the thighs feel as though they're traveling backwards, and that will give you space in your pelvic joint, in your hips. And then if you come deep enough, the hands might rest to the ground, but make sure you're not holding yourself up and limiting your stretch. So keeping the arms soft wherever they are. Every time you breathe out, the knees become heavier and the chest lowers to the feet. Now, if they are hanging up here and you feel like they're painful in the way that they're resting, then you need to find another brick, but you can use pillows, and rest it beneath your thighs, just so there isn't that tug on the hips, and then take it again from here. And eventually you'll lose the brick and the legs will start to come deeper. One more breath down here. Use your inhale to bring yourself all the way back up. Now walk your feet another half a foot away from you. And this is one of the only poses where we actively work rounding into it. So you're now going to curve your spine and think about your forehead coming towards your heels as you bring yourself down as deep as possible. You can rest your forearms onto your thighs. I'm going to demonstrate this without a brick. You can rest them onto the shins and then use that to allow the chest to sink deeper and the legs wider. A lot of this pose is about releasing and letting gravity do the work for you. There's no strap to pull against, no feet to bring ourselves down deeper on. You let gravity bring you in as you release. Make sure the shoulders are relaxed, they're soft. Taking 3 more breaths down here. Slowly come back up to seated. And just noticing the articulation in your spine and how each vertebra starts to stack back on top of itself. And we'll finish with a pigeon pose. So bring yourself back to tabletop and bring your right knee to sit behind your right wrist and slide your left leg further behind you. Take your right foot and bring it out towards your left wrist. Come onto your hands, right up onto your fingertips. And to begin with, feel as though you're scissoring your thighs together to give you some height. And then as you exhale, let the thighs relax again, sinking towards the ground and either staying up here on your hands, or perhaps you come down onto your forearms. If you are finding that actually you're staying quite high and it feels an effort to hold yourself up here, then find something, it can be a pillow or a brick, and wedge it beneath that left thigh. And that will help you to feel a little more grounded and secure in the pose. Whichever variation you're working with, make sure your hips are square and you're not rocking over into this right hip. So working as if you could rest a drinks tray across your lower back. Relax your shoulders and let that relaxation spread through the rest of the body. Keep your right hip soft. Relax your right glute. Relax the right side of your lower abdomen and the gut, and that will help you to sink deeper. And the left leg has no role to play in this stretch. Keep it totally relaxed and soft. And when you notice your right leg tightening and tensing again, which it inevitably will, you just need to mindfully notice
and relax again on the exhale. And it's this constant noticing and relaxing that will find you your maximum depths and stretches. Let's take one more breath here. And bring yourself back up onto your hands. Pull your navel back to your spine, lift your hips, and then guide that right leg back. And we come onto the left leg. Left knee behind left wrist. And then bring the left foot over towards the right wrist and guide that right leg further back. The more of an angle you create with this left leg, working one day up to a complete right angle, the more you will feel this stretch. But if it's too much, the foot can come closer to the groin and you'll still be stretching into the glute. Come up onto fingertips, feel as though you're scissoring the thighs together, using some active engagement to then soften down deeper when you release, coming down either onto forearms, staying on your hands, or you might rest your head down. Make sure your awareness is in your left glute. So when you find your mind becoming distracted, leaving the physical body, just notice the sound of your breath and the feeling of your belly swelling with the inhale. And then the rib cage contracting with the exhale. And that should bring you back into the physical, where we can stay curious and help these stretches to deepen further. Notice where in the body you're holding onto tension. And it could be some really obscure places like your fingers or your toes here. Relaxing them as you breathe out. We're here for 3 more breaths on this side. Relaxing your abdomen, your lower abdomen, your left hip, glute, behind the left thigh. Letting it all soften down, surrendering into it. Let's take one last breath together. Slowly, if you're down, come back up onto your hands. Lift the hips back up high. Come to tabletop. We'll just find some mobility through the lower back, which is still a very important part of our leg mobility. So on the inhale, we look up for our cat-cow pose. And as we exhale, we reverse and we round. So you press up between your shoulder blades, tuck tailbone under and feel as though you're trying to connect hips to forehead. Inhale, look up. Feel as though you're trying to drag your hands back towards you and you're spreading your sitting bones as wide as you can get them, lifting out of your arms with your head and shoulders. Exhale, reverse. Inflate up between your shoulder blades. Try and press them as high to the ceiling as you can. One more time. Inhale, look up. Feel what's going on in your lower back as you do. Exhale, reverse, cat stretch, press high. Come back to a neutral spine. Bring yourself around to seated, and that could be kneeling or cross-legged, whatever's comfortable for you. Rest your hands onto your thighs. Close your eyes. And we finish with 5 mindful breaths, just to seal off this practice. You're going to inhale through the nose to a count of 4. And exhale through the mouth to a count of 8. Taking 4 more breaths like that. And as you do, just notice how you feel physically now. Noticing all of this space that you've created in the body today, and threading your breath down deep into these areas, flooding them with fresh breath and fresh energy. Let's take 1 more breath together. Inhale for 4. Exhale for 8.
Tuck your chin to your chest. Take a moment to appreciate the body and just expressing gratitude for everything it's achieving right now. Open the eyes, lift the gaze, and have a wonderful day.